if I get under 60 active listings at any given time, all of a sudden I'm like, I don't really know what to do. I've got extra time here. Sometimes people are like, man, how do you do that? That's just impossible. I don't have 60 listings in my entire office, and I have 10 business brokers that work for me.
Today, I have the one and only Trent Lee. Trent Lee of First Choice Business Brokers. You have probably seen him winning awards. He is the talk of the town in my circles with the IBBA and just the general broker community. He's been at it for a while, and there's a lot more to Trent than just deal making. But I would call him a volume broker. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into technology, a lot of things. This has been a fun place to interview brokers from around the country and other deal partners. You and I go back a little while. How do you think we met, Trent?
You know what? I can't even remember, but I do know that it just doesn't, an IBBA event just doesn't end right unless you and I are riding together to the airport afterwards. So it's been a number of years. I can't remember exactly how we met, but we've shared plenty of dinners and plenty of networking and rides to the airport, and even barely made a few flights together.
Indubitably, yes. Those are. There's been a few close calls, just like closing a deal. Sometimes you don't know if you're going to make it to that destination, right?
Exactly.
I'm excited to go deep a little bit. Let's start kind of a little bit before. Where did you grow up? Tell me about kind of what you did before you were a business broker. Let's start there.
Yeah, born and raised in Las Vegas. Las Vegas has been home for me. So I grew up as in an entrepreneur family. My father had a number of businesses, pretty good sized businesses, and actually that's you may want to get into this eventually, so I'll just lead into this. It's actually how I found out about the business brokering industry to begin with. I was the oldest son, and my father had a company, depending on the time of year, between 500 to 700 employees, pretty good sized company. And that was like my ticket to easy life. I was just going to take over the family business. And right as I was graduating high school, I was about ready to live in Peru for 2 years for a church mission that I did. Right before then, he got essentially, I didn't know it at the time, but a private equity group came in and said, "We're interested in buying your business." And at the time, I worked for him. I would save up. I'd work in the summers and after hours, and so I was around and I would see how this worked a little bit. And he politely told him, "Thanks, but no thanks. This is a good family business." We had honestly a fantastic lifestyle growing up, and he wanted to continue that and politely told him, "Thanks, but no thanks." And they said, "Well, at least let us make you an offer, and then you can tell us no." Well, they made him an offer, and he said yes. So there goes my dream of taking over the family business. But in all reality, it was a lot more involved than that. It was really, as I look back now that I'm a father, what a wonderful opportunity. He brought me and my brother along for the ride. So in a lot of these meetings, I mean, really, what business do 18, 17, 16-year-old kids have being there? But my dad took us to a lot of these meetings, and so we saw the process go from in the due diligence phase, the quality of earnings phase, when they'd have a bunch of people in the office camped out for 2 weeks going through everything. We went out to California for a strategy session with a tax planner to help mitigate taxes in the cell. And that's how I became introduced to the industry. Obviously, I was young. I couldn't. Most people, don't come out of high school or even college, for that matter, and be a business broker. They just don't have the experience or the expertise in area. And so I started a couple of businesses, some of which were fantastic, and some of which crashed and burned. But I was able to sell two of them. Um, and that was a good by then, decade and a half later, I had a little bit more experience under my belt. I'd gone through the process, not only watching my father go through it, but now having built and sold two of my own businesses. I thought, you know what, these business brokers that at least that I'm interacting with, I can do a better job than this. And that's how I got into the industry.
A lot of our friends are like, yeah, someone sold my business and I thought I could do that. Did you
Yeah.
end up using brokers to sell yours or did you do it without a broker?
One with and one without.
I too met a broker on my first business sale, and I didn't know they existed before I met one until I needed one. I think that's a lot how a lot of people find out about brokers. Except for
Yeah.
you, you had an inside track. You saw it
Yeah.
happen at a young age.
It was a little bit full circle because I thought back in high school, you know what, that business brokering thing was interesting, and I just kind of had it in the back of my mind and just needed to wait for the right time to get into the industry.
Interesting. In private equity, that was a while ago, but I want to get later into how things have changed. I think private equity is becoming a bigger deal now. There's
Yeah,
probably more private equity now and it's reaching
yeah,
farther
for sure.
down towards Main Street now than before. But that's so
Hmm.
if you got some early wins there
Yeah,
and you got to see it from the inside, that explains a lot of your entrepreneurial drive and experience there. One other thing that I know we have in common is we're in the Mosey Nation. We're both fans of Alex Hormozy. I'm
yeah.
curious, are there other call them influencers, people that you follow, that you steal things from, ideas from, that you learn from, that have influenced you?
There are some good ones. I'd have to think through that. There's a gentleman called Clay Clark, named Clay Clark. Um, he has a really, really good set. He's a business coach. He essentially will take businesses and help them build systems, processes, procedures. Has a number of books, podcast, training. He puts some really good content out. I love his stuff. And here's the thing about it. It's not that he's inventing or creating anything. It's that he's packaging all the best concepts. And this is kind of a side tangent, but I lose patience with business books now because they have one or two good concepts and they take 200 or 300 pages to just give it to me in 20 or 30 pages. Clay takes all of like the best practices of building and growing a business, and not that he's creating any of these. A lot of them you could just pick and choose out there and you can get them, but he packages them all together in such a tactical approach that it's very, his book, he has one book that I don't anymore. In fact, I give it, but I would, every time I'd sell a business, I would give it as a closing gift to the buyer because it was so valuable. It's like 500 pages, but it's just packed with tactical concepts rather than of a book that big that has two or three or four concepts and it gives you all this long history and research. It's just packed after page of really tactical concepts.
We'll have to put that in the show notes. That sounds like yeah, a good resource. Thanks for sharing that one. Okay. Well, so you have a history seeing if from the ground up being involved in deals. You met some brokers, you ran some businesses, you sold some. And fast forward to today, you've been at this. How long have you been a full-time business broker?
I can't remember if I started in 2017.
I think it's about the same time as me. So we're looking at a decade. We're coming out. We're nine years or something like that. I remember it started around the same time. So
Yeah.
what's your experience? What is it like? Because we have a lot of people that watch this that are buyers, owners, brokers. What's your experience of being a full-time business broker? What's a day in the life for Trent look like?
It's part detective, financial detective, accountant, part therapist, part deal maker, part negotiator, part online marketer, part paralegal. I don't want to say legal because we're certainly not doing legal, but you have to have such a vast. You have to have a knowledge of so many different areas to be a good business broker. That's partly why someone coming right out of high school or college really just don't have the experience to do it and to do it well. So it's a mix of financial strategy, negotiation, people skills, all rolled into one day, and then you mix it by a bunch of different businesses.
Never a dull day as a business broker, right? What of all those, is there a certain part that you enjoy more than others? What's your favorite part of this gig?
Actually, putting the deals together. I like getting buyer and seller on the same page where we put an APA, an asset purchase agreement together, or an LOI together, and we've come to terms on everything. I enjoy bringing parties together, and that's partly why I don't chase the in business brokering. It's traditionally it's like we're getting bigger deals. Now you get to a certain point where like, oh, that's too small for me. I would never touch that little pizzeria. I still do the small deals because one, they pay the bills. They're often, not always, they're often easier to close, but they in turn into referrals. But I still get a thrill and I still get joy from putting buyer and seller together and getting on the same page to put a deal together and have it actually work. Now of course we have to get it across the finish line, but that same joy, that same thrill doesn't necessarily, at least for me, I don't find that I have a greater thrill or more joy that the deal's any bigger than it is small. It's just putting the people together and that satisfaction of bringing two people together to make something to work. And I enjoy that on the small or big deals.
Yeah, there's a part of a deal where you kind of like know it's imminent. Like you've seen the buyer and or the seller overcome a few hurdles, and you're like, we're going to close this deal. This is going to happen. Like, they're in love. That's to use the expression.
Yeah.
Like, we found that we did the matchmaking and we found the right set, and we're going to have a few more bumps. But it's like that's the fun part for me, is seeing that it's coming to fruition, and what your client signed up for, you see it. It's going to happen for them, and I do enjoy that part too. And you're right. There's always a part of the deal where you're like, how are we going to put this together? And the problem
Hmm.
solving part, it sounds like what you enjoy.
Yeah.
Well, my man, we talked about 9 years. You know, you and I were doing this pre-COVID, and it's crazy, but now we're starting to ask for like 6 years of financials now. Right now, we're filming this 2025, so we're reaching back to 2019 just to get like a. Normally, we only ask for like a 3 to 4 year, but then you get right into the middle of COVID. So my point is, pre-COVID and post-COVID, I'm touching on financials, but what's it been like as an intermediary? How have things changed for you brokering deals before and after COVID?
It's modernized Zoom for me. I was doing Zoom before COVID, and not everyone was familiar with it. And there's particular reasons why I do Zoom rather than in-person meetings that are beneficial that we could talk about later if you want. But um, it's made now Zoom. Everyone is familiar with it. Everyone can get on for the most part. You run into someone who hasn't quite figured it out here and there, but for the most part, it's made my process of gathering information because I'm using AI, automation, transcript out of these calls that just can't quite get when I'm in person unless I've got some sort of transcription device there. But it allows me to gather the information to build a executive summary, a listing, a pitch deck so much easier because everyone now is familiar with Zoom.
Agreed. And I don't know about you, I deal with a lot of retiring boomers, and I've heard them say, I'm allergic to Zoom. You know, I
Mm.
can't use Zoom. But once you get them on Zoom, it's not that hard, and you get through the first meeting, and typically they adapt pretty well. Everybody can do Zoom. That has been a great advent of COVID, is that it's forced people to get used to this virtual thing that we're doing. I do want to dig in a little deeper about the technology piece. Outside of the AI stuff, are there other reasons? It's obviously more efficient, but do, are there other reasons why you like Zoom besides the technology piece, like interpersonal reasons?
No, not interpersonal. In particular, when it comes to sellers, I'm still trying to meet with a seller initially face to face. There's nothing that beats the face to face, knee to knee type meeting. But after that, almost all of my meetings at that point forward are all Zoom. and it's primarily one out of ease. It's easy to just meet by Zoom, not have to travel and deal with traffic all over, because I can just like book out my schedule every 30 minutes. I've got Zoom back to back, no travel time, and all the information's there because everything's transcribed and recorded, and I can access everything. But not only that, and I think this is starting to become more common. I've been, for lack of a better word, preaching this for years now. I, at this point, almost do not take a listing unless the seller gets on Zoom with me and does a seller interview. One, yeah, one, because now I've probably met with them in person, or via Zoom if it's somewhere that we can't quite travel to before. But one of the reasons is it allows me to do a seller interview and gather all of the information that I need to build an executive summary. I use AI, and at this point, it's taken me about 12 minutes on average to build a full pitch deck, a full executive summary, because I have so many prompts and step by steps, multi-stage steps here, where I can take all the information from the seller interview in the Zoom, run it through AI, and I've got multiple stages and prompts that just spits out the everything, and then it's just fill in the blank on my template. Not only that, it's so much more efficient because I sometimes I hear these business brokers that are spending hours and hours or days on Sims. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just so inefficient. We live in a world now where if you are still doing that, you will literally get left behind. There will be business brokers that are coming up that will just run circles around people that are not adapting to the technology. But not only that, it allows me to have potential buyers, once they've been vetted and qualified, watch the seller interview that I did so that they can get the full backstory on the seller. That way, when they come to meet with the seller, which by the way, the first meeting is on Zoom, it allows them to get all of the back information so that the seller's not having to tell their same story over and over and over again. But yeah, and I'm a stickler on it. I watch. I have technology to watch. If a buyer wants to meet with a seller and they haven't watched the seller interview, I can tell them to the second how much time they spent on the seller interview. If they haven't gone through and watched that full seller interview, I cancel or postpone the buyer seller meeting and tell them go back and do. I'm polite about it, but go back and get prepared. Do your homework and watch the seller interview and prepare a list of questions. And then when they come and meet with the seller interview, I again do it on Zoom, transcribe that because inevitably I don't know everything about every single industry. And when I have a particular buyer that's asking relevant questions about a seller in a particular industry, that is building my database of questions and answers that then updates my SIM, my executive summary. So the SIM's a living, breathing document that gets better and better every single time I have a buyer seller meeting because it gathers more information. And I make the buyers do the homework so they've seen all of the past questions and answers, but the stuff that we don't get gets added to the next round.
I love it. So, Trent, the prompt engineer, number one, we're moving into the handling high volume, and the basis of this for you is leveraging technology. So, Trent, the prompt engineer, you can make a CBR in 12 minutes because of these prompts. And then I like this notion of we're going to respect the client's time. You're Mr. Buyer or Mrs. Buyer, you're asking questions the seller already took the time to answer, and you want to meet with them before you took the time to watch what they recorded for you. Like I think that it's being respectful to the seller. And then
Mm-hmm.
the iteration, the iterative process of taking great buyer questions and putting it back into the book. I think this is the core of efficiency, because I do see owners getting burnt out on answering the same questions. I understand why the buyers want to hear it from the owner, but it can be recorded in most cases.
Yeah.
And it's a good test of the buyer to say, what questions can you come up with that the owner hasn't already answered? I can tell a lot
Yeah.
about a buyer. Sometimes they're like, "Oh, I just want to grab a beer with them." It's like, we're not here to grab beers. We're here to
Yeah,
figure out if you
exactly.
want to buy this business. So
Yeah,
do your homework.
exactly.
So,
Yep.
okay. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about that process. Let's get into it a little bit more. We're clearly into the handling high volume. Because I was joking before the call, like you're the Michael Jordan of business brokers. And here's he didn't like that analogy. Here's another one. Have you ever seen the chart of top podcasts?
I mean, I generally know what you're talking about, but I can't say I've seen it recently or I don't know what's on the top, but
There's this
I know what you're
ridiculous
talking about.
chart, and it's like, This American Life. There's all these podcasts you've heard of, and then there's this long tail, and there's Joe Rogan, and he's like 20 times more popular than any other podcaster. And so I won't call you the Michael Jordan of business brokers. I'll call you the Joe Rogan of business brokers, without all the weird stuff that Joe Rogan has. But my point is, the average business broker is doing a deal a month or less than that, a few deals a year, and you're putting up 100 deals a year. Is that a
Not
fair
quite that
statement?
much, but a good amount. Not yeah, a
High
good amount.
volume. You've
High
won the
volume.
IBBA's Dealmaker Award for several years in a row.
Yeah, I think it's
Most
six or seven
6
years in a
years.
row.
Okay, good when you
Hmm.
lose count. My point is, you're putting up big numbers that most intermediaries just can't or don't do. So we touched on this a little bit, how you're using technology, but I mean, what do you think it is that's holding most business brokers back from doing this kind of high volume?
Good question. Poor systems, bad time management, and lack of mindset of what they're really capable of doing. Yeah, they end up treating each listing like a custom job. And it's not. It doesn't need to be. Or, well, let me rephrase that. It it can be if that's the approach. If you're happy doing 5 or 10 deals a year and you think, man, I've got 15 listings and I'm so busy I don't know what to do with my time. I mean, that's just nothing. That's just a drop in the bucket. If you are treating every business as a custom listing and you're manually doing everything and you've got poor systems in place and bad time management in place, it doesn't need to be like that if you want to graduate into more of a high volume. And I'm not saying that that's a suggestion that every business broker needs to do or make. That works for me and my personality and my background and the way I like to operate. But it's certainly, I'm not here to say everyone should do that or do it my way because that would be one fairly arrogant and not applicable because not everyone has the same desire and skill set and wants to do it my way. So, but if a business broker is looking to increase volume, then yeah, they need to increase their systems, increase their technology, increase their time management skills, increase their automation, increase their mindset of what they're capable of doing. If I get under 60 active listings at any given time, all of a sudden I'm like, I don't really know what to do. I've got extra time here that I don't plan it. Sometimes people are like, "Man, how do you do that? That's just impossible. I don't have 60 listings in my entire office, and I have 10 business brokers that work for me." So it's just it's about systems and processes. If you don't have good systems and processes, then volume is just a disaster.
We have the same amount of time in each day. You mentioned number of listings. I was talking about number of deals closed. Are there specific KPIs that you're tracking for your business or maybe for your life? Or how much TV do you watch in a given day, Trent?
So here, total side comment. None. I'm not a TV watcher. In fact, just kind of a funny side note, and I'll make this quick so we don't get too sidetracked. But one thing that I found interesting was my kids are now older. We've got 4 kids. 2 of them are in college. The other 2 are in high school. But when they were young, we had one TV and they were playing ball in the house, which they know they're not supposed to. Baseball hit the TV, cracked it, and we told them, "Okay, you guys are out of TV until we were going to have them work." And obviously they're too young to actually earn money, but we were going to have them work to replace it. And the first week that they didn't have a TV, they did not know what to do with themselves. It was not good. And then something interesting started happening. They started playing games. They started going outside. They started being creative. Kids, like when we were growing up. And then something even more interesting happened. What we found is not only were they behaving better, but they were getting along better. And as my wife and I just watched this, we suddenly became, well, maybe we're not in such a rush to replace the TV. And what we found is a lot of these Disney and Nickelodeon shows they're family oriented, but they show completely inept and incompetent parents, and the kids run the household. The kids tell the parents what to do, and the kids talk back, and they run everything. And when we took that influence out of their life, life got better. And so I know this is extreme, we don't do this anymore, but probably 10 or I don't know, maybe 12 years, we didn't have a TV in the entire house. And now we're not anti-TV. We had a theater kind of we'd do movie nights, pizza and movie nights with the kids, but we didn't have a TV with any service. We finally got one, and we do have one in the house, but we have no service to it. And so we're just not TV watchers, and so that is not. In fact, just another little side story. I had another business broker come up to me a couple years ago, and they were just like, "Man, how do you do it? How do you do all this volume, and how do you close these many transactions?" And we talked a little bit, and then he just turned to the side to talk to another business broker, and they started talking about like season 6. I don't even know if I'm making a Game of Thrones or whatever. I don't even know if that's even a popular show anymore. But they were like catching up, and I'm like, well, there you have it. How many I mean, how much time did it take you guys to watch 6 seasons of it? And so there again, there's a balance. We probably are a little bit more extreme on that, but I, I'm not wasting a lot of time. If I when I do have, and by the way, I have plenty of free time. I play tennis almost every day of the week, about 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. So I don't start my day. I have plenty of time. I do stuff with the kids. In fact, last night. We got home about 11 p.m. from the lake. So go out to the lake. So we have plenty of family time, but it's just not sitting in front of the TV.
Love the focus on family. And I think what you're talking about is just priorities. You're going to watch Game of Thrones. You're not going to have an excuse why you didn't get your business done. And you can
Yeah,
spend time with your family without watching business or without watching TV. I think these are great takeaways.
yeah. But you did ask about KPIs.
Yeah. So zero hours of TV. Give us some more. That's a personal one. Give us some more KPIs about your business.
I'm tracking leads every single day. I'm tracking how many leads come in, and I'm comparing that to the same day last week. I'm then tracking how many leads sign an NDA, and I'm watching the percentage. I want to make sure that there's no breakage in the amount of inquiries versus the amount of leads that are signing the NDA. And then I'm comparing that percentage to same time last week. I'm looking at buyer seller meetings that are booked.
Hold on. So seller leads correlated to buyer inquiries?
I'm
I'm
sorry,
sorry,
buyer
buyer
leads.
leads. Oh, buyer
Inquiries
leads.
on, yep,
Oh, okay. Okay. Making sure
yeah,
that they're signing the NDA.
yeah,
Is there
exactly.
something holding them back from signing the NDA?
Yeah, exactly. Because at this point, I don't manually send out NDAs, and I'm hoping any business broker that's listening should not be doing that. I mean, that's just like the basic of the basic automation. But you have to check, yeah, you have to check automation. If there's ever a dip, there's usually a problem in technology. That gives me some indication that something's not right. I do track seller leads as well, how many potential seller leads come in, and I just measure that over time. I'm looking at, like we talked about, buyers. I want to see how much of the seller interview they watched and how much of the sim they reviewed. I can see every single page and how much how much time they spent on the sim. I am tracking buyer seller meetings, how many buyer seller meetings that I take, and then that cascades then to how many follow-ups, which then cascade to offers, and then finally deals in escrow. That is a good measure. I tend to like at least 15 deals in escrow that are fully signed, funded, earnest money deposit, that we're somewhere in the phase of due diligence to closing.
And again, if you're watching, that's not normal. That's high volume. And but we're hearing these systems that you're using, software. How many different CRMs have you used in the last decade that you've been doing this? Have you changed CRMs a few times? Or you
Hmm.
stick with one?
Yeah, I've changed a few over the years. Eh, Here's the thing, they're all pretty good. It's just you got to put in the time to learn the capabilities of the CRM, assuming you're using whatever the top 10 that all kind of have, for the most part, the same capabilities. Whatever CRM, because I get asked this question, what CRM are you using? Like there's some magic in the CRM. There's no magic in the CRM. The magic is in actually using the CRM. So the best CRM is the CRM that you're going to actually use, because garbage in is garbage out. So you gotta whatever that happens to be. And so I've used a handful, and I've changed, here and there. I'm for the most part content with what I use now. It does take some tinkering. I've got to customize it a lot and
That's where
build
I was going to ask,
different
the
things.
tinkering process, because I know you set up a system. You mentioned sometimes you got to check on it, but sometimes you throw a wrench into it, and now you're spending a lot of time improving it. So, what do you think is a healthy amount of time for running the system versus tweaking the system, as far as your proportion of energy going into it?
Mm, I don't, that's a good question. I don't really think about it in a healthy amount of time, because I think of it more as if I'm having to manually do something 2 or 3 times a week, that's an opportunity for some automation. And I think about how do I automate that? And that's just my own personality. Partly because I like building systems and processes, but partly because I'm lazy. If I keep having to write the same email or address the same concern that happens to come up at the same time in some sort of a deal, whatever it is, that's an opportunity to build some automation and resolve that little bottleneck. And so in my mind, I always lean towards spending time tinkering or building the automation, because doing it 1 or 2 times is more efficient than spending the time. But that's only true after you do it 1 or 2 times. Then it becomes a matter of just spending whatever it takes, an hour or two, to build the system, so you never have to spend 1 or 2 times doing it every single week for the rest of your life. And so I always lean towards messing around with automations and technology and ideas. And there's no CRM that's going to do it all. And so you have to be able to know it well enough to customize it. And also, I'll go out and build, pay developers. Sometimes I have ideas or things that the CRM can't do, and so I'll put pieces together. And I know what I want to do. I'm not smart enough or have the experience to know how to code or program, but I'll just go and pay someone to do it. And I'll tell them, here's what I want. How much are you going to charge me to build it? Build it, and it works.
Yeah, that's a nice shortcut there, because we're talking about using automation. Now you're talking about outsourcing the development of the automation. That's kind of a next level type pro tip there, where if it doesn't do what you want, find someone who can make it do what you want.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to be all things to everyone, and I'm certainly not a technology expert. I like using technology, but if I have an idea, I'm not going to spend all of the hours learning how to, do Python coding. I'm just going to pay someone who's a Python coding expert to build me this program that I need, which is exactly what I did. That's why Python, the coding language came to mind, because I just paid someone to build me I just needed a unique feature that wouldn't happen in the CRM, but I needed two systems to sync together and get the information and to scrape some data out, and I just paid someone to do it.
Well, that is some advanced level stuff, in my opinion. But to you, that may just be the system architect in you. I think you may be taking that for granted. But
Maybe what I don't like is, if I have an idea to do something, to automate something, I don't like I'm not satisfied with the idea of, oh, the CRM doesn't do that. Well, that's fine. The CRM doesn't do that, but someone else can do that. If I've got an idea to make it work, I can put a system, I can connect something, I can connect a third party, I can connect a programmer, and we can make the idea work. I'm not satisfied with taking no, the system can't do that as an answer. I'm going to make it do what I want it to do.
Well, now we're back to problem solving, which is your favorite thing. And speaking of using people to solve problems, where you're using a ton of automation, but where do you stop using automation? Where do you start to use real people, or is it all bots? Am I talking to Trent Lee right now, or are you a bot?
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually a really good question because there's a certain point where high tech is very valuable, but there has to be a switch to high touch. And I'll tell you where I make that switch, and that's why I'm never worried about automation, bots, AI taking over the industry. Yes, it can make us more effective and it can make us more efficient and we can increase volume, but high tech is never going to completely replace an industry that has a component of high touch in it. And so what I end up doing is using automation a lot on the front end for buyer education and buyer process, getting them through the NDA and deliverability of the SIM and the pitch deck and getting them educated in preparation to a buyer seller meeting. But once there's a buyer seller meeting in place, I use automation to follow up after that buyer seller meeting I create a video as to every single step in my process for a buyer and a seller has a video with it. So I have a video that goes out to them after a buyer seller meeting where they schedule get something on my calendar, but from there on out, it's pretty high touch, not high tech anymore. What I just choose to spend my time on is after a buyer has gone through and done all their homework, signed all the disclosures, read the SIM, watched the buyer seller interview, prepared for the buyer seller meeting, had the buyer seller meeting, which I host. I spend my time with them after that. Up until then, I'm not even talking to them.
Yeah, with the buyer. You're cutting through the noise with technology until that one or those few raise up and they get through your technology. Now you're gonna spend some time with them.
Yeah, but here's the key. I'm not just using like generic text messages or emails. Because I create a video for every single step of the way with that buyer, they've at that point, even though I haven't talked to them, they've watched 3 to 5 videos where I specifically am educating them about the process, what they just completed, and here's what to expect next. And then they go to the next stage. Here's what you did. Here's what happens next. And so they are generally familiar with me. For lack of a better relationship word, they're building a little bit of a relationship with me through video, even though it's not me personally.
They feel like they know you the first time you talk to them, even though you haven't talked to them.
And most of my deals are from first-time buyers and first-time sellers. I'm not specializing in these high-level transactions where they're professional buyers and sellers. And so because there's so much education around video and I'm educating the buyer and the seller on every single step of the process, I can't tell you how many, not weekly, daily emails I get from buyers or sellers that are like, no one is doing this. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you for outlining the video. I wasn't sure what an NDA is. Now I understand what it is. I understand why it's important. I understand the why it's needed. And then they get an executive summary. Oh, here's a video that explains in the executive summary what an executive summary is, how we came up with the valuation, what market multiples are, what SDE is, what EBITDA is, how we calculated that and applied market multiples to them, what debt service coverage ratio is, and why it's pre-approved for the SBA. Now, this is all very educational stuff that buyers and sellers don't get from anyone else, but you have to either do that specifically as a business broker and have that same educational concept over and over, or as a business broker, you don't do that education concept and your buyer and seller are worse off and less educated than they could be going through the process.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great point that you and I know this stuff. We can't assume everybody knows it. There's an expression from Vince Lombardi, like, this is a football. Like, you win the Super Bowl, you start over from the basics. And I think there's an element of this in what you're saying. Like, let's not assume somebody knows what an NDA is. Let's explain every process. And if it's a video and they already know it, they could probably just skip it. But you're not you're giving everybody the opportunity to get the education that they need, and what a service that is. To
Yeah. Do you, and you know how many times people have been mad at me that I sent them a video that's too basic? Never. Never. No one's mad. They just skip it. If I do happen to have a good educated experienced buyer and they find that the video's basic, they can skip it. It's not a big deal. But to my other point, you know how many times people have said, "Thank you for explaining this to me. I didn't know about this, or I didn't know what SDE was, or I didn't know how you guys justified the asking price." Because we're giving them so much education, I'm like I said before, it's daily. I get emails daily on that type of stuff.
we are in the education business in a big sense. And I know we're shifting towards the kind of the state of the market and how there are people that are saying they have all the answers to buy a business, and they're not always. Maybe they're just selling a product instead of a solution. But I think you're right. A lot of these are first time buyers. The research shows that they love this information that you're giving. They need this information. And I think it's a service to the business seller because you're avoiding all these problems that come up if you don't educate the buyer and the seller. It's going to come up, so why not get in front of it?
Yeah, here's the reality, the way I look at education. Education makes a much better experience for the buyer and the seller. It doesn't matter what side of the transaction they're on. If you can spend the time to educate them as to why you're doing what you're doing, it makes it's basic communication. It makes them so much more at ease as to what to expect and why you're doing it. But if you do it in a way that you either have to manually do it if you're going to do a really good job to spend the time educating, or you automate it. Is it as good as in person and in doing it individually? No, but you have to sacrifice scalability for how much time you can spend in person doing all this. If there's a business broker that's out there that's not educating them along the process, it's just making their job a lot harder, and it's making the buyer and seller experience a lot poorer because no one's helping them along the way.
The education you do is through video along the process.
Mhm.
Um, and you do that so you don't spend a lot of one-on-one time repeating the same thing. Is that a
Yeah,
fair? And
yeah,
then what about
exactly.
when the buyer and owner are together and there's three of you, or maybe there's more? Who's doing the talking? Are you doing a lot of talking when the buyer and owner are doing their meeting? You're stepping
No,
out of the way?
I have about a 30-second intro pitch that I give them, and I specifically tell them this is not about me. I'm planning to go on mute. Mr. Buyer, share some background, some experience, so Mr. Seller knows who you are and why you're interested. And then Mr. Buyer, this call is for you to drive. You're going to drive this call. Now, keep in mind, before that happened, they each got a video from me saying, here's how to have a successful buyer seller meeting. There's one video that goes out to the buyer where I tell them exactly what to do. Here's the things to say. Here's the things not to say. Here's how you can prepare. Don't show up and just kind of like make up questions as you go. Don't show up and ask questions that we already answered in the sim. And I give them a whole spiel on video of here's how to have a successful buyer seller meeting. Same thing goes for the seller. Here's how to have a successful meeting as a seller. Here's what the things you need to say to the buyer. Here's the things you need to not say to the buyer. Here's let them, take the lead, answer their questions, and basic sales psychology for them. Yeah, exactly. And so I'm spending almost no time on that call. I'm just hosting it and doing an intro.
Yeah, that is their call. I know we've discussed this a lot offline about our role in the buyer owner meeting, and if we even need to be there, which it sounds like you need to be there to get the answers to the questions and the answers to the questions. But that's interesting. You're doing all of your talking, like not even to the buyer. You do a lot of onboarding, and then you do a lot of education through video at scale. And then when they're together, you don't do the talk.
Yeah, that's, at that point it's not about me. Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I had a call a while ago that was buyer had their own representation, and the buyer's broker they asked all the questions, and I didn't say this, but I'm like, who's buying the business here? Like, why is the broker asking all of these questions and driving the call? I want, at the end of the day, the buyer to drive that call and ask the questions. One, it tells me how prepared they are based on the quality of their questions, but it also gives me a pretty good indication of how serious they are. The broker's not there because the broker's not buying the business. So that's my opinion. That's the way I do it.
The side story on that one, we have a deal. It's under contract with a different buyer, but we had a buyer group come through, and it was this guy is going to buy it for this other guy, an older guy, younger guy, the money guy, and then the operator. And we did the buyer owner meeting, and we did similar to what you do. We opened up. This is how it's going to work. Buyer, give your intro, and then ask your questions. And the investor did all of the talking. All of the questions came from the investor. And our seller is like, what about the guy that's going to run the business? What about the guy that I'm going to train?
Yeah.
And he didn't say a word. And then I asked a question of the operator. It was something like, how do you think your experiences up to today are going to translate into this business? And the investor answered on behalf of the operator. And I was like, well, what are we doing here? Like, anyway, they weren't the right ones. But we do tend to stay out of those conversations. But we also are I'm thinking about, what does my seller want to hear? If he's not asking that question, I'm going to ask on behalf of the seller. But I do want them to get to know each other, see if they like each other.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to be mindful of the time. I want to start to wrap things up a little bit about just kind of the state of the market. Since we talked a little bit about COVID, where are we at with this silver tsunami? This is something we've been talking about for a while. What proportion of your clients are retiring from small business versus just making a change? I call it the young hustlers that are moving one business to another. What's the blend of owners that you're seeing reason for sale?
Honestly, I haven't seen a change on my side. I don't follow the demographics and all the metrics behind it to say like where are we at on that stage or how valid is the silver tsunami even at all. I just don't follow it that much. Most of my sellers are selling. There's always some that are selling for retirement, but there's no more that are selling for retirement today than there was 7 years ago when I was doing it. So I don't know that there's like some massive influx of just a bunch of old people that are now at least that I'm seeing. Now, granted, I'm in Las Vegas, which is a fairly transitional city. It is a little bit more movement, and so it's common for people to move in and move out. And so I might not have good insight there, but I'm not dealing with just a bunch of old people that are ready to sell their business to retire any more so than I was 5 years ago, 7 years ago.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. And what about, we touched on AI a little bit, and you shared your thoughts that it can't replace the high touch piece. But we just established I think you have an engineering brain. Some of your businesses were technology in the past. Where do you think this is going? What's the future of business brokerage once you throw AI on top of that?
AI is going to change the job, but it won't replace the job. But brokers who resist it and don't adapt will fade out. I mean, they're just not going to be able to compete. So brokers who use it will become highly more effective than brokers that don't. And so AI can do a lot of the grunt work, paperwork, the follow up, the content, the data crushing, but buying and selling a business is still emotional, and no one's going to cry on the AI's shoulder. Where the broker needs to be high touch, right? There's still a high touch component of what we do, not high tech.
Yeah, it's trying to do there's the AI therapist stuff that's coming out. There's a lot of weird stuff that's happening with AI, but it definitely lacks that feature. It's still a computer. It may be intelligent, but it's still a machine. It's an intelligent machine, right? Whatever intelligence is. Well, we talked about IBBA. That crowd has changed. since we've been attending those events over the last year. Have you noticed that change? I mean, when I first few years I was there, I was like, this is a bunch of old dudes here, and I think brokers are getting younger. Are you saying that?
Yeah, so really what we're talking about is the silver tsunami of business brokers. We want all those old school, grumpy, grouchy, old, stuck in their ways business brokers to just kind of retire out and let the new guys
In the
step in.
beginning, you were talking about your father's deal, how they closed it and they did diligence. They had a big table and they got
Hmm.
out the legal documents and they probably underlined stuff like that was old
Yeah,
school brokerage,
yeah,
right? I
yeah.
mean,
We
now
sat in the conference room for 2 weeks.
that's crazy. Now it's like, here's the QBO file. We're gonna push the diligence button and we'll get a Q of E out of it.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. It's weird how sometimes we just talked about all the analysis that goes into it, the financial analysis, but then we talked about putting people together and just letting them sniff each other out and see if they want to do business together.
Hmm.
Um, I think you're doing it right as far as using the technology to cut through all the noise to get to the people parts.
I'm doing it right for me. So yeah, yeah, doing it right. It works for me. Certainly don't want to say everyone else has to do it that way and or should do it that way, but for me, the way I like to operate, the way my background is, the way I like to structure my day, it works.
Wrapping up here, I've got just a few questions here. I wonder if there's any kind of, we talked in the last 40 some odd minutes just about how you got started, your life in entrepreneurship, how many hundreds of business owners you've helped, business buyers you've got into business, the state of the market. Is there any kind of message that you want to share from your experiences in entrepreneurship for buyers or owners of businesses, maybe future brokers, that just kind of comes to you that that you think people would appreciate?
Just as much as we've talked about how important education is, I'm a big proponent of that, whether you're a buyer or a seller, with so much information and so easy to access that information. Getting educated is the best thing a buyer or seller can do. And I'll give you just another side little note here. Before I meet with a seller, the very first meeting, we talked about wanting to meet in person, but they're getting a video from me, and I'm educating them on what SDE is. Most of them don't know what it is. I'm educating them on how to calculate it. I'm showing them, I'm logging in, doing a screen share. Here's where I log in to pull my market comps. And so when I show up to talk about the valuation of your business, this is not a surprise. They're not gonna know what the agenda is. And honestly, they're probably gonna have a pretty good idea of what their business is generally worth, because if they watch the video, they know how I'm going to calculate SDE. They know what a market multiple is. They're going to know what a debt service coverage ratio is that we need to back into. And so when we meet, we're going through, and it's no big surprise to them that they're like, oh, you know what? I didn't realize my business only had $100,000 of SDE and it's not worth $1 million. Well, they already know generally what their SDE is going to be. They know that 10x times SDE is not a realistic multiple that they're going to get, and so that education component is, I think, a big deal for both buyer or seller. And the best thing they can do is become sophisticated in what they're looking to do here.
I love the transparency that you bring, and education is a big, that's a big takeaway from this conversation. You're leading with education, and it's working. It's working for Trent. Well, I have two questions left. And the last one's going to be, how can people find you? But you see the seahorses. You're talking to a former marine biologist. Everybody that comes on the Raleigh Business Broker Show, I always like to ask them, what's your favorite fish?
So you're gonna be severely disappointed with me here. Yeah, so I'll give you a little background here. I've never in my life caught a fish. I went fishing once, and I was in the same boat with two of my friends using the same exact bait. They went way over their limit with how many fish they caught. I didn't catch one. Ever since then, I've never wanted to go fishing again. I've never cared about fish. I don't like fish. I don't eat fish. I don't eat seafood. So disappointing here for you. I don't have a favorite fish because honestly, I don't even think I could name three types of fish. Um, I just I've never spent any time thinking about fish. So I don't have a favorite. I don't like I don't have any pet fish. I don't like the way they taste. I don't like catching them. So I don't have any good fish insight here for you.
Um, there is a guitar fish. Are you into music?
No,
No.
I'm not into music.
That was a stretch. That was a stretch.
Yeah, podcast, books on tape. In fact, my kids kind of joke. They're like, Dad, I don't think I've ever heard you actually listen to any music in your life. It's always a podcast or a book or some type of education. Same thing with TV, right? I'm looking at learning and becoming better and educating. To see if I drove around for an appointment or on vacation and listened to music, I would not know what to do with myself.
Back to education, always self-improving. Okay, well, where can people find you? Where can people get educated? Your educational content, where's the best place for them to learn more?
Any of their favorite social media channels. They can look me up: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm on all of them. I post pretty regularly, 3 or 4 times a week that are what I think fairly good educational content there. So they can look me up at whatever their favorite social media channel is.
Love that about you. Thank you, Trent Lee, for educating buyers and sellers, for educating brokers about how to improve their game and be more efficient and do more deals if they want to, if that's right for them. Thanks for being on the Raleigh Business Broker Show. This is Neal Isaacs on behalf of Trent Lee. Thank you, and mahalo. And that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Trent Lee, first choice business broker. I feel humbled to call Trent a friend. I've known him for a long time. And speaking of humble, I think he's pretty humble. I mean, you just heard from a multi-year award winner. I Googled him because I see him win all these awards, but I wanted to see it. Top individual dealmaker 2019, #1 business broker in the US 2018 through 2020, top dealmaker 23, 24. Basically, every year he's cleaning up with the awards. But as you heard, he does it through education. What a great message. The secret to success is helping others through education. And he's a family man. So, the reason I do these interviews is I like to shine a light on other people doing great things. Even if they're other business brokers, I can always learn something from folks like Trent Lee. And when they're as nice as Trent Lee and as generous with the information and the lessons that they've learned, I find it quite inspirational. So I hope you learned something from this. If you're a business owner, if you're a business buyer, if you're a business broker, I hope you gained some valuable insights. Share them in the comments below. Let me know who else you want me to interview here on the Raleigh Business Broker Show. And thanks for watching. See you next time.